So good afternoon. It's wonderful to see all of you. My name is Anna Siefken, and I'm the Executive Director for the Wilton E. Scott Institute for Energy Innovation. We are located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we're very excited to continue our summer webinar series through 2021. I am, as I mentioned, Anna Siefken. I'm providing you information about myself. If you would like to get in touch with me, please reach out to me via LinkedIn. And we can connect, talk about potential opportunities for partnership. There are a lot of ways actually to get in touch with the Scott Institute. So we are on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, obviously. We have a newsletter that you can sign up for, and you can hear about events like this one, including some upcoming events that will be back in person again. So who are we? Who is the Scott Institute? We serve as the research hub at Carnegie Mellon. We are an R1 university, and we have about 170 faculty working on energy-related topics. But interestingly, we have a special and strong connection with entrepreneurship. All the way up to the provost and the president of our university are entrepreneurs themselves. They've started companies. And so our session today is specific to the challenge of hardware, and we'll talk about that in a minute. This series has been going on actually since March of 2020. So when things started to shut down, we wanted to continue the conversation. And so through 2021, we've sort of pivoted away from COVID-related issues, and we're now looking at sort of operations and policies, strategies for of the new administration. So we have some upcoming other programming, and this is not a complete list. It's just a snapshot of some things that are coming up in the near future. So on August 18, we have a fireside chat with Emily Reichert, who is the CEO of Greentown Labs. She will be visiting Pittsburgh that day. And we have one of her colleagues with us today, Ryan Dings. We have a distinguished lecture with CMU alumna Brittany McCoy, who has a new position in the Office of Air Quality. Catherine Hamilton with 38 North. Many of you might know her from the Energy Gang. She'll be joining us on October 12th for a virtual session, a distinguished lecture. And then, hooray, October 26th, we have an in-person lecture with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory Director, Martin Keller. So again, we have some additional programming that's and we want to make sure that you stay up to date. You can sign up for our newsletter and see more about our upcoming events, both virtual and moving to in-person as the college moves in that direction at the front page of our website, which is cmu.edu/energy. So today's webinar, especially important, is talking about the hardware challenge. So we've done a lot of work in terms of moving forward technologies specific to any number of different chemistries, but let's talk about hardware today. So we have a couple of special guests with us. But I want to say a special shout out and thank you to the Department of Energy and the American-made challenges, particularly the solar challenge, which we've been deeply involved with as a power connector. These are to accelerate technologies in the solar space, as well as I think there are now 20 some challenges that they have launched. So that's in partnership with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. One note on that, there is an upcoming deadline with the American-Made Solar Prize, and they've created 2 tracks. So today we're talking about hardware. They also have a software track. You can learn more about this particular challenge and how it can help your startup at their website. And I think the website is listed on there, but I did want to let you know that October 5th is the deadline for round 5. You can get more information from us if you're interested. Just send us a quick note. So our speakers today, an amazing group from around the country, are here with us today. So I want to start with the farthest one away at Lacey and say thank you. I think next comes Greentown Labs, BRITE Energy Innovators in Ohio, and Innovation Works, which is right here in Pittsburgh. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Ryan Dings is the Executive Vice President and General Counsel of Greentown Labs. It's North America's largest climate tech incubator with locations in Somerville, Massachusetts, and Houston, Texas, their new location. So prior to joining Greentown Labs, Ryan served as the COO and General Counsel of Sunwealth, which is a solar investment firm committed to simplifying the process of impact investment. So Ryan also served on the executive team of Blue Homes and has advised numerous early stage clean technology companies over the past decade. So welcome, Ryan. So we are still waiting for our colleague Janine Elliott, who hopefully will join us in the next couple of minutes. Rick Stockburger is our next guest. He is the president and CEO of BRITE Innovators, which is in Warren, Ohio. So at BRITE, Rick helps energy tech startups by providing them with access to funding, advanced technology, a diverse partner network, including Carnegie Mellon, and a space to call home. So in just under 4 years, he's brought in out-of-state business, increased VC investment and revenue about 20 times for BRITE's client companies, and multiplied BRITE's revenue by 5. He's also developed partnerships with high-profile industry leaders, including Lordstown Motors, Altium, and General Motors. And then finally, we have Jeff McDaniel, who is portfolio manager at Innovation Works in Pittsburgh, which is one of the most active seed stage investors in the country. So he works with both hardware and software technology startups and manages the energy investment portfolio. So prior to Innovation Works, he worked in strategy and R&D at Westinghouse, and he held a number of senior leadership positions at additive manufacturing technologies company X1. So welcome, friends. It's very good to see all of you. I am going to start with our first question. And I will say that we have a Q&A on this particular session. So as you have questions out in the audience, please do let us know. You can write your questions in the Q&A section. So with that, I want to start sort of at the top. And I want to talk about the process that you follow with working with hardware startups to help them in their early stages. So what's the most important thing that you'd like for investors and entrepreneurs to know? So obviously we're starting very big. And each of you, I'm sure, has a very different perspective. So I'm going to start with you, Ryan, and then how about we'll have Rick and then Jeff. And for our future questions, I'm just going to let you all jump in as you want to. But as we get started, we'll do it that way. So Ryan, start us off.
Well, I would be glad to, and good to be with everybody this morning. It's a real pleasure. And Anna, thank you for all the great work that you do in Cleantech. So hardware, it's hard, right? And it requires a lot of space, and in many instances, a lot of CapEx in order to build your products and get it ready to go to market. I think one of the things we pride ourselves on at Greentown Labs, and we've identified working with a lot of companies, is identifying and really making sure we have the resources available that those hardware companies need. You're going out and you're raising money. Say you raise an angel round or a seed round, or you're able to get a grant to fund the technology development from concept to product. That capital is going to go fast, and there are a lot of resources that you need in order to build your prototype that can be very, very expensive. One of the things that we've tried to do is identify all the various things that hardware companies need and make them readily available, and make sure that when companies come into a place like Greentown Labs, that they're set up to succeed with the tools and the resources that are going to help them build their products. So here we've built out a prototyping laboratory, a wet lab, 3D printers, a machine shop, testing chambers, a tool shop, all these various things that early stage companies, especially when they're just at the angel or seed stage, could eat up their entire raise spending money on. What ideally you want to spend your capital on are kind of the human resources. Building out an early stage team that's going to be able to take this notion, this concept that you have of a piece of hardware that may be truly novel and may be a real breakthrough in terms of advancing the clean tech economy, and give you the opportunity to invest that angel and seed stage capital in the technology development in lieu of the CapEx. So it's one thing we've certainly thought a lot about. I think a lot of hardware companies here find it really useful to have these shared resources and these tools. And you add on top of that the community of people working together, and in some instances even collaborating to solve problems, and it becomes a really powerful vehicle to help accelerate hardware companies.
Fantastic. So Rick, can you go next?
Well, I can do my best. So yeah, no, absolutely. So from that standpoint, BRITE really exists. We looked at all the great work that Greentown Labs was doing and said, we need something like this in the Midwest. And so, from a hardware standpoint, you know, we see a lot of barriers, and specifically kind of what we saw the barriers as is really kind of access to first customers that we can figure out and make sure that you're actually building the right product for said customers. And so we really went the route of looking at how to create the best network that we could of engaging with kind of larger organizations, making sure that there are communication points with larger companies that could be buying these hard tech products. So we do have a research and development lab in our space here in Warren, Ohio. And you know, that is really focused on battery testing, wet lab capabilities, IoT products, so RF testing, and then event testing for IoT products, so battery testing basically. And then we also utilize our microgrid testing capabilities as well with our grid simulation. But you know, I think one thing you'll likely hear throughout the day is kind of building community. And I think one of the things that's really, really interesting, whether you're in Pittsburgh or Ohio or Boston or Houston or LA, is all of the incubator programs that are kind of in this space are networking and building together. And so no matter where you're located in the country, I believe that we're really kind of, you know, some people use the word de-risking this for investment and opportunity and job growth. I like to say we give entrepreneurs unfair advantages to be successful in this space. If you know you weren't associated with one of the programs, it's a long way to hoe, and it's a long way to hoe by yourself. So we believe in helping people build good teams, build good networks, and smart people at Carnegie Mellon and Greentown Labs can build really, really great products.
So I echo everything that has been shared already. I would just add, here being in Pittsburgh, you know, one of the things that we do at Innovation Works, as well as our hardware accelerator, Alpha Lab Gear, is to create, you know, a safe space for entrepreneurs to create. It is very hard, but it doesn't have to be as hard. So whether it's helping create and draft the strategy that makes sense for a company to, or a concept, if it's not even a company yet, to move to whatever the next logical step is along the path, from a technical standpoint, but also from kind of a fundraising strategy standpoint and understanding the different points along the way that require perhaps a slightly different approach, whether it's working with one type of investor or another, or identifying networking partners that can help you solve some of the problems that you're trying to solve.
Thank you. So as we try and continue to get Janine on the line, because I see her as a participant, we're trying to elevate you, Janine. Talk to me a little bit about the investment that comes from outside ventures, because obviously when we're talking about this space, we're talking about more patient capital. People can look outside of their region to other parts of the country. So what are some of the key points that teams should be thinking about when it comes to venture or investment outside of their inner circle? And I don't know who wants to start on that one.
I nominate Jeffrey.
Jeffrey, we'll start with you.
I accept. So you know, it somewhat depends, but you know, everyone more or less has to start from somewhere, and that somewhere is usually an individual or a few individuals who are taking the time to work together to come up with an idea. But very soon, those individuals recognize that they cannot do it alone because it costs money, it takes time. So, you know, at the very earliest stages, you know, we're seeing founders or pre-founders that have a concept but don't know exactly how to socialize it. You know, so at the very beginning, I think it's kind of helping people understand that they have to socialize that concept. They have to share it with a professor or a colleague, a trusted ally who can then help them start thinking about what it might cost to move that concept forward. Many concepts start in universities, so there's some resources that might be available, but not all of them. And so at the earliest stages, we are, looking at companies that are ready for an accelerator, even though they might not yet have a benchtop product that they can, or demonstration product that they can share. And so it's, I think, critical to be able to, for those individuals to at least be able to tell a story, and then kind of move on from that point. But at the larger picture, we're kind of somewhat regardless of kind of what stage you're at. It's important to recognize that there's more than one place to go, even though it might feel like you have to follow maybe a traditional investment path that let's say a software startup that isn't in the clean tech space might, or some other type of startup firm, company that might just go to a traditional venture capital firm or to an accelerator. The government, universities, and some other sources, including individuals who might be interested in the concept, are also places that you're going to want to go to, or at least identify, early on. And so, Anna, I think I drifted a little bit, so I'm going to stop for a moment and make sure that I'm addressing the question that you posed and not going too far ahead.
No, I think it's really about what should teams be thinking about with investment. And so I think that you're actually right on point. So Ryan, do you want to go next? And Rick, I'm hoping that your video is still working.
Mine seems like it's working. I switched back to my computer. I can't see you anymore.
So Ryan, I think maybe why don't you go?
Yeah, no, I would be glad to. There was an important little nugget in there that Jeffrey raised, which I think is super critical, which is you got to be able to tell a story. I don't care what stage you're at, or really what sector you're in. Being able to tell that story and communicate the value of your product and your company to others is so incredibly important, and that's lost on a lot of people. Lost on a lot of engineers. So it's something that is really important. A couple other things which very much come to mind, and this actually goes back to the notion of community. For a lot of entrepreneurs, there's so much excitement and just, enthusiasm in invention and having this product and company. And then when you go out and you raise money, you're just going to get inundated with no's for, maybe kind of the first time in your life or your career. It is hard. And entrepreneurship, it's probably not talked about enough, can be a very lonely journey, which is why community, I think, is really, really important. If you come to a place like Greentown Labs, we're not going to raise the money for you, but we are going to increase your odds of meeting people and having some of those serendipitous connections, which can hopefully help increase your chances of raising capital. So as you're raising it, a couple other points Jeffrey mentioned, which I think were spot on. Non-dilutive funding, especially in the hardware space. Explore every grant opportunity you can. And when you pitch it to investors, especially if you're trying to match the non-dilutive funding with dilutive capital, you can look to the investors and say, you're basically getting a 50% discount on R&D because we've got half of our money in a non-dilutive form. And it can be a very powerful thing. The angel and seed stage capital is sadly a lot about who you know. That's why I think working within networks and communities and organizations that are intentionally trying to spotlight a diverse cross-section of entrepreneurs and really spotlight the value of hardware and spotlight the importance of climate and clean tech, that there's very valuable. As you go, from seed into kind of Series A, you got to be mindful of traps in terms of the size of the rounds that you're trying to raise, and make sure that you're going out and you're finding the right investors who can actually invest the amount of capital that's going to help drive your growth. And as you're doing so, understand clearly whether you're raising on technology milestones or commercial milestones, and be 100% clear about what it is. What is that milestone or that destination going to be at the end of the runway for the current raise that's going to reward investors with growth in the overall value of your company? and understand that difference between the technical milestones that investors value and the commercial milestones that everybody ultimately wants to see, turning your product into revenue and driving enterprise value. So a lot there, but it's because it's an incredibly critical topic for entrepreneurs, and one I think you can tell we all deeply care about, because we want that this capital is the fuel that's going to help these entrepreneurs build their products and hopefully solve climate change for our kids and grandkids.
So one of the things that we talked a lot about when we got together to plan for this call was about this idea of having a commercialization roadmap or a pathway, like really sort of spelling out what that looks like. So from your perspectives, what are the most important things that a company needs to have as a part of that plan? Maybe from the beginning, kind of we're talking about sort of early stage companies. So what do they need to keep in mind?
I think it's extremely important that that you don't just focus on the technical challenge that's in front of you, and in essence, you want to start there, but you also want to then overlay what it's going to take for you to achieve those various technical milestones, with an overlay of what are the costs that are going to be associated with achieving those. Who do you think you are solving a problem for? You should go ahead and identify, even if you haven't had that conversation with someone. So, I often am challenging companies to spend just a little bit of time with a blank sheet or slate and create a roadmap. And it doesn't have to be very detailed. It doesn't have to have the detail that you might have built into your programmatic processes and planning, and that you also are taking time to think about some of the things that you might want to develop in the future and plotting those on that same roadmap, even though you might not be spending any time really trying to solve that particular problem right away. It'll become helpful later on as you tell your story to others. And just to pick up on one thing that Ryan had mentioned, often entrepreneurs kind of think a little bit more serially instead of kind of doing certain things in parallel. And they may think that non-dilutive funding is the first stop. Let me see if I can get a research grant to help me further this and de-risk the challenge before I start talking to investors about it. That's not always the best approach. You should also be thinking about how can I complement the funding that I have with some outside funding that can help me get to where I want to go. And so that's kind of that parallel tracking that I was referring to.
Here's what I'll simply say when it comes to kind of thinking about the market and commercialization pathways. The dirty little secret of clean tech is that it's almost entirely B2B. And so much of this is going to be business to business sales. Getting a large corporate incumbent to buy your product is going to be an incredibly long sales cycle, incredibly long. You have to understand where you fit into their supply chain, or if not supply chain, how you integrate into their value chain, and get comfortable with getting to know them early, which may seem counterintuitive because you want to protect your IP, especially if incumbents you think may look at you and as more of a threat than a potential ally. But get comfortable at an early stage with talking to some of the incumbents and some of the corporates in the space, and start to build those relationships, because that sales cycle is going to take a long time.
Great.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Rick or Janine?
I'm going to let Janine go because she just got here.
Okay, I know, Rick, you've also had some technical difficulties, so I'm excited to hear from you as well. I've been hearing pieces of this conversation, but can you refresh me on what the question is?
Janine, we were talking commercialization pathways and why that's so important for hardware companies.
Okay, yeah. Absolutely. Well, glad to be here today. And I think one of the areas where commercialization pathways are a really interesting animal for hardware is that, you know that somewhere along your journey, you want to pilot. And at Lacey, we do a lot of work around helping startups pilot their concepts and validate, to Ryan's point, both the commercial side of the equation and the technical side of the equation. And I think the thing that can be really tough for hardware entrepreneurs, and this happened to me as well in my company, was treating piloting as kind of a checkbox exercise. That it's like, if I can just get somebody to work with me and prove that this is as awesome as I think it is, I'll get the investment I need and I'll get the partners I need, and then I'll just be off to the races. And I think that's really where customer discovery can play a really key role in making sure that you're not just doing a pilot for the sake of doing a pilot and proving something works, but really using the data from that pilot to both validate technical milestones and to validate commercial milestones that are going to be relevant to a future customer or relevant to a future investor. So to Ryan's point, getting to know the people at the open innovation office at a major corporation, or sitting down and having coffee with different investors, to Jeffrey's point, is a really powerful way to continue to do sort of stakeholder discovery, to make sure that the data that you do in this 1 or 2 really expensive pilots is actually getting you the data that's going to move the needle with the people that are downstream on your roadmap.
Yeah, Janine, and I think to kind of look at that too, I think the thing we just talked about and what we mentioned, but we haven't like said out loud, is like, we've looked at, okay, we need to have technology validation. We also need to have commercial validation. And what does that actually mean? Is like, we have to have a founding team, because not always everybody is like savvy enough to be able to understand technical and commercial milestones. And it's not even necessarily understanding them, but just having the actual capability to do it. And frankly, it is 2 to 3 full-time jobs to do either of those, especially if you throw investment into that round and understanding how to raise capital. And so, that's something that we look at from that standpoint is, what kind of team do you have? And it doesn't always necessarily have to be 3 founders, but if you were able to raise an angel round, like, the first thing that you're doing is making sure where your team's weak is where you pick up strength, to be able to like fill those gaps and those voids. So, I think, honestly, the most important thing to any company, hands down, is that your team can identify the market and build the right product for that said market. And so that's kind of where I'm at on that. Is Anna gone? Should I?
Yeah, I don't hear or see her either, but just maybe to continue on that thread. Sometimes the concept that has been created has more than one ultimate market. And a challenge is going to be deciding which market are you going to commit to first. And sometimes the first market or your first customer or partner might not actually be that large, but it might advance you along the way on that path, on that roadmap that you've created to get to your ultimate goal. So I think it's really important to realize that you may be solving problems, but starting perhaps with the smaller ones first, until you can get to that ultimate goal.
How about, let's talk a little bit about the current manufacturing paradigm. So we are not manufacturing as much as we could in the United States. And so that doesn't necessarily help in the hardware space. So are there efforts that we should be undertaking to obviously increase this, or how do we change the narrative around manufacturing in the United States?
Wow, powerful question. So I'll be honest that actually with Lacey, a lot of the time we're working with sort of mixture of hardware and software companies. And then we often will have our startups work with organizations that really specialize in hardware. So for example, there are some programs like Scale for Climate Tech out of New York that does a really great job. Greentown Labs does a really great job with its Forge initiative. around what it means to manufacture within the US and in this case, specifically in the state of New York or specifically in the state of Massachusetts. Because I think the thing that people really need to remember is that, and actually even in Los Angeles, the fashion industry is huge and onshore. So I think people need to remember that you don't have to go offshore. There are actually some really good opportunities to work within the US. And in fact, you're going to get better turnaround times. You're going to get better quality control. But at this point, I actually want to turn it over to some of my colleagues who probably have even deeper knowledge of that. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick.
This is my favorite question. And Anna, I know you can't hear me. I feel like you could say some like really fun, cool stuff about you right now. And you wouldn't be able to respond. So this is exciting. But no, so this is like my favorite topic like ever in the world. And so like one of the things that I'm really focused on right now is like supply chain of batteries. Because and specifically electric vehicle batteries, 80 to 90% of that supply chain is controlled by China. And we have to look at, what does that meaningfully do as we are accelerating the adoption of electric vehicles? We are selling our potential for revenue and job creation in the United States and creating revenue for China. And so that's not very smart considering kind of the economic stranglehold that they're starting to put on the rest of the world, as well as the environmental challenges that come from China are just so disastrous. And so while we're trying to clean up the American supply chain and the American way of life and promoting EVs and moving forward, like if we don't do it carefully and we don't create an American supply chain that is honest, like first of all, environmentally sound, second of all, morally sound. And because as you look at the slave labor and the use of the Uyghur population in China, it's not good. And so one of the things that I think that pushed the Chinese economy forward very quickly was when we incentivized solar so quickly, but we didn't create the supply chain for manufacturing of solar in the United States or Europe or Canada or Mexico. It was coming from China. And so as we're weighing these very important things to move our country forward in a meaningful way, investing in that supply chain, investing in research and development, and frankly, investing in American innovation is one of the most important things that we can absolutely do and accomplish through that. And so that's why I'm very, very excited over the, frankly, previous and current presidents that have looked at focusing on American supply chain, growing American manufacturing, because we do have the skills, capabilities, and talent here in the United States. It's just we refuse to cheat. We refuse to unmorally source products, and we refuse to have huge environmental impacts, which all make Chinese and other countries in that area of the world able to compete in a way on price that we just can't. And so to me, one of the most important things that we can do to look at bringing back American manufacturing is making sure that we're investing meaningfully in the Midwest. And that comes from infrastructure bills, that comes from DOE, that comes from SBA. And so as you guys were talking about the SBIR programs and all of that, that's how it comes together. That's how we rebuild American manufacturing in a meaningful way. The new Department of Defense bill that just passed is really, really investing in that supply chain. I don't know if you guys saw or looked, but recently they've said 90% of drone capabilities and components for the military have to be created in America or Europe. And so that's things that the government can do to bolster American manufacturing in a meaningful way, and making sure that jobs are being created here. Because frankly, I want my kids to have an opportunity to build something great, just like my father did when he was a steel worker in the Midwest. So I answered as quickly as I could.
No, that's great. Thanks, Rick. And light of the time, I'll just add one of the things that we've done here in our region is connect existing kind of mom and pop and more traditional manufacturers to hardware companies and helping them both kind of understand that there might be mutual beneficial reasons to have relationships together. So sometimes you can find a little bit of help very close to home. Ryan, I think, let's see, Anna, you can hear us, but I'm going to kick it to Ryan, and then Anna, I guess, listen out for the end of that.
I will.
Yeah, Janine, thanks for the Forge shout out earlier. So the Forge Manufacturing Initiative was a program that spun out of Greentown Labs. I can literally see the Forge team's desks right over here. Should have said I'm coming to you guys live from Greentown today. For seed Series A hardware startups that are looking to manufacture, it's small batch manufacturing. There's tons of opportunities for that in the United States, and it's just a matter of finding them. And so that's what Forge is all about, really helping to make those connections and making sure that early stage startups can find the right contract manufacturers to help them with small batch production without running into giant supply chain issues or sending production overseas, but do it right here in the US. So many opportunities, and it's just a matter of finding them. And for a startup, it can seem very, very daunting to go out and find that contract manufacturer, vet that contract manufacturer, negotiate with that contract manufacturer. And so that's what an organization like Forge does. And so I think, the more we can do that and find, build connections, and I think Rick, agree with what you said, 110%. The more we can do all of that, the better off we're going to be in the future. So Anna, back to you to kind of lead us home here on the last few questions.
So I think that we actually, now first I have to ask if you can hear me. So can you hear me?
I got you. We got you loud and clear.
Okay, good. So I realize I might not be showing up today, but I am here in spirit. The real last question I have for you is, given all of this incredible commentary on what is needed to sort of advance hardware, whether it's doing small batch manufacturing or partnering with companies or supporting small businesses, making connections, what's maybe the most important thing? And this will be sort of our send off for today. What's the most important thing, your nugget of wisdom to give to these startups? And I would say, of course, stay the course, but beyond the usual wisdom, what would you recommend? And I'm going to suggest that we do, again, as Jeff just said, let's have Rick and then Janine and then Jeff and then Ryan. And then I'll know when we've gone through the whole circle.
Team, partner. I will keep hitting and reiterating that. Now, when I say partner, I think one of the things that we've seen success with our companies specifically is looking at, what a manufacturing partner looks like. And sometimes, that turns into investment. So once again, understanding that your model, your commercialization pathway and your technology pathway is really, really important. One of the technologies that we haven't mentioned, but we're having some success here because we have a partnership with America Makes, is the additive manufacturing space. And so we're interestingly able to do some really cool prototyping work with one of our partners that is focused in the additive space. But as we're building prototypes, it's just a lot quicker, a lot more efficient to kind of use that technology. Right now, one of our companies is using additive manufacture to print batteries and trying to figure out different ways and different like exoskeletons and frames that we can utilize and create batteries specifically for drones that would lower the weight capacity and frankly raise the power capacity. And so overall we're looking at people that are trying to have the same outcomes and goals as you are and viewing them as allies and not competitors is just really, really important right now, especially when you're small.
Cool. Yeah, in the spirit of stakeholder engagement and thinking about partnerships, thinking about team, I'm gonna take a slightly different tack on my sort of biggest thing that I like to remind hardware innovators about, and it's that you're going to be really good at building the thing right, but the question is, are you building the right thing? And so that's sort of a saying that came from Silicon Valley around how to think using a design type of mindset, how to think about using your stakeholders, your customers, your regulators, your investors, your partners, everyone along the supply chain, to make sure that you're actually building the right thing that the world and the industry needs, as opposed to what you think the world and industry needs. And then focusing on the technical development, because that's, of course, most likely your comfort zone. So just to pick a little bit on James Howard's comment here in the Q&A, you know, I think the fact that you are already aware of where you sit in the supply chain and that you're 3 or 4 levels removed from the end user is a huge piece of awareness that I'm really glad to see that you have. And I think the next step there in terms of generating traction along that process is getting really clear on how the value proposition is actually different for each of those people within the value chain. They might be similar, but there are actually going to be nuances between what actually would influence them to adopt your technology over alternatives. And I think that the more that you're able to dial in those nuances, the more you're going to find you're going to build trust along that supply chain, and that will hopefully create some of that market pull that will get you the traction that you're looking for. So I'm going to pass it off there. Just don't worry about building the thing right. You've got that in hand. Worry about building the right thing.
That's great advice. If I'm wearing an investor's hat, regardless of what stage the idea or product is in, I want to feel really good that I understand where you want to go. So I'm just going to kind of repeat what I was sharing earlier and the importance of a roadmap. And it doesn't have to be highly detailed, but if you can't tell your story while that roadmap is in front of one's eyes, it's going to be very difficult for you to get the kind of traction that you want. Just to kind of start to try to answer a little bit more of the question that was posed in Q&A. And some of you may be so far removed from the ultimate customer, at least at this point, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't understand why that right thing that you've built is right for them. You should still be able to tell that part of the story. That's all part of customer discovery. But if you think you're going to end up working maybe with one partner for a while, let's say you're an advanced materials company and you've got, you know, the kind of the magic, you know, secret ingredient that someone might want, you have to do the same kind of customer discovery, but just with that one potential partner. And what I mean by that is, it's one thing to say, hey, if we can figure out, to prove to you that our, let's say, unobtainium is, you know, is lightweight enough and strong enough for, you know, for your product when you buy it, and they say yes, and they say, well, let's do a little bit of testing on it. You haven't finished the discovery yet. You also want to understand, once the testing is done, what else is going to be required for that partner? Because it's not going to go directly into whatever's flying or powering something. Then you're going to have to transfer that over to other stakeholders within the organization. So that's, you want to be able to convey that you understand those challenges as well, and convey that you understand what their process might be. It may take you 3 or 4 or 5 years before you are successful in getting unobtainium into that product, but that partner might spend millions of dollars to help you get there and take you through their stages. And so you need to understand what those stages are so that you can convey it to an investor and other stakeholders that want to help you. And I'll kick it to Ryan.
Those are great points all around, especially Janine and Jeffrey. Really appreciate what you said. I think if you think about those potential customers, many of whom are large incumbents in the space, you know, for those incumbents, change will happen at the speed of trust. They need to trust you and believe you, because they're fat and happy and getting paid and selling products. And for them to take a chance on a new product that, you know, could be revolutionary in many different ways, from, you know, having helping an organization push towards carbon neutrality, or, you know, reduce their COGS, or just make their product better, whatever it may be. For them to take a chance on your piece of hardware, they got to trust you. And that change, that shift for them to bring your product into their supply chain will happen at that speed of trust. So you got to build those relationships early. You got to understand what it's going to take for them to say yes. And to Janine's very thoughtful point, make sure you're building the right product and build it right. Oh, so important, especially when you start manufacturing thousands, but make sure that you're building the right product. And my final parting thought is, as you're doing so, and you're taking on all the incredible challenges of being an entrepreneur, find your community. Just find your community, whether it's in Pittsburgh or Ohio or LA or, you know, Boston or Houston or, you know, New York, anywhere in between. Find your community, because unless you're a multi-time entrepreneur and you've done this before and you know exactly what you're doing and you've got the resources to do it and the team to do it, finding that community is going to be incredibly powerful and valuable. One thing we've heard from many of our entrepreneurs lately is that it's as hard to hire right now as it is to raise money and find the right people. And to Rick's really thoughtful point earlier about finding that right founding team and then building the team out, that's a tall order. You're going to have, you know, and I don't want to say an easy time by being in one of these communities. We never want to say we make entrepreneurship easy, but we're surely trying to make it less hard. And so I think that's what finding that community is all about. And you got some great communities on this call. So Anna, we're delighted to be with you today and hope this was useful for the CMU team and everybody on the line.
Well, I certainly appreciate all of the wisdom that you all have shared during this segment. Certainly appreciative of your time and your company's efforts year round. So I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. And I personally can't wait to hear all of your responses when I listen to the video, which will be available within the next couple of days. We'll post it, and so you can hear all of this and share it with your friends. Thank you again to all of you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at an upcoming event with the Scott Institute. We'll remain virtual for the next little while, and gosh, I cannot wait until we're in person again. Thank you all so much, and have a great balance of your week. And good to see you. I'm waving.